Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we will be discussing the importance of diversity and inclusion in game design. We have the pleasure of interviewing two experts in the industry, Rob Gallerani, Senior Principal Game Designer at Activision Blizzard, and Micka dell'ova, Player Experience Designer at Remedy Entertainment and also founder and president at EthicALL Game Jam. Both Rob and Micka have a wealth of experience and insight to share with us on how diversity in game design can enhance the player experience and drive innovation in the industry. So first, let's say hi to Rob and Micka. Hello. How are you doing?
Hey everyone, good. And you?
Yeah, it's always funny to say hi again after we've said hi before starting the webinar. So yes, we already said hi. This is fake, okay? So this is not true. We already said hi. So it's really nice to have you here again. And the one thing that we usually do before starting all our podcasts or webinars, we wanna ask you a question, and the question will be: if you could travel in time, where would you go? It will be to the future or to the past? The first one that has the answer can go.
Future, for sure.
The future?
Yeah.
Why?
You see the result of my work on inclusion in video games.
That's all he cares about. And how about you, Rob?
So if we ignore healthcare and the fact that me appearing there would probably be very detrimental to, I would be burned as a witch. But
where are you going? Where are you traveling? I'm gonna stop you now.
I have a watch that makes noise. I would be a heretic. But I think I would go to the past more as a way to understand what really hasn't changed between now and then. Like, it's very easy to always assume that, oh, well, we're modern and we're progressive and we've invented all of these things. And I'm curious how much happier people are now than they were then, right? Like, if I went back to the 1400s and went to a small Italian village, like, would people be so distraught, or are people more happy? Like, and I don't. In my lifetime, I will never know that because I'm only going to see my little chunk. So, like, just perspective.
It's true. It's very interesting. You know what I always wanted to do? I wanted to travel to the past. It's funny that you said a little Italian village, because I always wanted to travel to the past and get into those, restaurants that you see in movies, like in the side of the road, where you tie your horse in the 1600s and you order a pot of stew or something like that. I always wanted to taste what the food in these places was like. I don't know why I have like an obsession. Every time that I see the Lord of the Rings or something, like someone's tapping in a place that looks like from the 1600s, and I want to order a pot of stew over there. I don't know why. It's just, I have it. Okay, so thank you so much, and let's go straight down to business. So, Micka, let's start with you, and I wanted to ask you, how do you believe that diversity in game design can enhance the player experience, and how can it drive innovation in the industry?
There is two aspects to this question. Firstly, having diversity in your teams will bring different sensitivities and backgrounds, which will bring different perspectives in solving a problem or answering a design question. For example, and I speak from my experience, if the designer in charge of the character creation system is queer, they are more likely to offer an inclusive system because it is a topic they know as queer person. And the second aspect, more mercantile, which generally pleases the studios, the more your game will address a maximum of players, the more copies you will sell. So yeah, and then diversity is a win-win approach.
Absolutely. And What do you think, Rob? Can you share some examples of how you incorporated diversity and inclusion in game design processes that you worked in?
Yeah, so there's obviously the financial gain of your game sells to more players, but there's also the aspect of players don't always know what they don't know. And it's not just for games, it's for anything. And as designers, there are hundreds of little teeny decisions we have to make every single day. Like, where is this button placed? How is this thing? And while we tend to make a lot of those decisions very purposefully, a lot of times they're instinctively. And instinctively, most people make stuff for themselves. And so you you won't always think, oh, how could this be played with one hand? How can we make this for someone who can't hear as well as everyone else? And so trying to surround yourself with people who have other points of view, even people who are not gamers, right? Because most people who have been a gamer for the past 10, 20 years, there's not a huge amount of variety of the target audience. And so even though you may have people from many different walks of life, they're all unified by being gamers of a certain type of game. And so we even try to open up to people who aren't necessarily gamers. So one example was when we were making Diablo 2 Resurrected, that game is 20 plus years old and we were remastering it. And so one of our QA players only could use one hand. And we essentially said, hey, we're not going to make the game any easier because we want to make the same game for everyone, but we want you to play it. Where are your pain points? And the things that we would have never thought of, for example, the ability to take the thumbsticks on a controller and remap them or switch them, right? Like,
Wow.
we were thinking, oh yeah, the X button could be this, or the right trigger could be this. We'll let players remap that. But actually, you can't press the left thumbstick with your right thumb. That's just not possible to do. And so the ability to remap, which took us maybe 2 minutes, we just hit
it. But it wasn't thought of before.
Nope. But it meant all of the difference. And it just boils down to, it's not that anyone's being malicious. It's just, usually all of those little decisions, you just kind of go to your what you know, which is what you've lived. So surrounding yourself with teams and other things like that have those things just helps catch so much low-hanging fruit.
Yes, it connects with what Micka was saying. I think you both agree that you basically design based on your experience also, and like you're saying, bringing other voices in the mix and opening your eyes to a wider set of necessities. I think it only makes the design richer and eventually more accessible. Micka, how do you approach designing for a diverse player base and ensuring that accessibility is available for all players?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I just gather information about players, and when I don't know, I ask people concerned by the topic or specialists in the specific field. For accessibility, I relied on all the guidelines for each accessibility topic, and I try to push it by proposing design solution, obviously adapted to the state of development of our game. And I try to not design based on my own preconception or my own player experience, because this is the big issue of the game industry. Video game industry is one of the few industries where a designer don't know or even care about the players. And I'm not just talking about diversity or accessibility. What are player psychological profile, their playing habits, what are their internal motivation, what makes them stay, what that make them leave. All this question represent the whole of my last year work about use player motivation as a design compass. So yeah, clearly it's about designing for others. Pretty simple.
And you, Rob, how do you ensure that you make your design accessible to the widest possible amount of players?
So I wish I could say, well, I've done it, right? But it's one of those things where every single thing we make, we're always like, oh, we could make it more accessible, more. So it's like a process. So to try and catch the widest net, one of the things that we started doing is, and I'm gonna quote it wrong, but it's either called survivalist assessment or basically what you're doing is it's based off of way back during one of the wars, the planes would come back and the planes would be all shot full of holes, and so the they started putting more armor where the holes were.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong approach because what they weren't looking at is the planes that never came back. And so it's the notion of what is your data not showing you? And so if we're surveying people who are already playing our games, we're missing all the people who can't play our games.
Yeah.
So
It's very
that was
interesting.
one of the biggest hurdles to do that. And what we have to do is we have to start allowing people to give us feedback through channels other than within the game. Now, luckily with Battle.net, we had like the Battle.net launcher, so you could take a survey before even getting into the game and other things like that.
Wow.
And there are other organizations out there that will sell you data on these types of things. And there's now groups. There are a lot of advocates online where they play games. They're blind when they play games and things like that. So reaching out to those individuals and be like, hey, could you play our game? Could you tell us what's wrong with it or how it could be better? So we had to be way more proactive than our normal. These are the people currently playing the game, and this is what they currently like, because that very slowly will only continue to narrow your field,
Yeah.
broaden your field.
It's interesting. And in your opinion, Micka, what do you think are the common misconceptions about diversity and inclusion in the games industry?
I think the problem is the cognitive biases we all have. I have too, but I just try to put them aside to design objectively. But the ones I often hear are accessibility will harm the balance of the game, or players won't buy the game if the main hero is gay. But it makes it clear that a player who likes to be challenged by the game will never touch the accessibility option, but also that some players are not interested in being challenged by the game. And it comes back to the topic of the different types of player, and not everyone enjoys a game in the same way. And if I have to find just one argument to answer both questions, it will be The Last of Us, period.
How do you... you gave us the example of addressing it by putting it on the side, right? To trying to be as objective as you can. And is there other ways that you think that it can be addressed? Rob or Micka?
Yeah, so I think that the making it an option that people can use or not use works for some things. But if there is an option, so a lot of people will play a game in the most efficient way possible, regardless of how fun it is. If you're playing a game and the fastest way to become the most powerful is to go into a cellar and kill the same bug a million times versus go out into the world and players will do that because that's the most efficient way to do it, not because that's the best experience. And when it comes to accessibility, if we were to say, hey, because you need us to auto refill your health potions for you because the ability to do this and hold another button at the same time is difficult, even players who don't need it will still use it because it's making the game for them. And they will then complain that it's there, even though they could have turned it
Really?
off. Some options are great, right? Like, oh, I want to keep text on the screen, or I want my text to be larger, or I want color by mode. Those are amazing to make as a toggle. But I think a lot of things, to be bigger and more impactful, you have to get to the root of what is the fun of your game and how can we have that fun experienced by people with many different abilities, right? So a lot of games nowadays, because we live in a franchise world, you're like, oh, you have to do it the same way it used to be. If we were to look at any first person shooter, the skill involved is how quickly can you put your cursor over a specific part of the screen. That is the skill you need.
The skill.
And that is a very physical requirement to do that type of thing. And so you have to go back and ask yourself, okay, aiming, is there a way to convey the fun of aiming if you have to do it in a different way? And those almost have to be done at the very, very beginning, which is why it's so tricky, because you're creating new game modes, and new is risky, right? At least from a business standpoint.
Yes, I'm sure that the business standpoint in general is usually standing on the weight of developing more and more ways to make games more inclusive for example, more specific or smaller audiences. And it's something that is always popping up in these conversations. And Micka, how do you see actually the industry evolving in terms of diversity and inclusion? And what do you think that what kind of steps can game studios take to stay ahead of the curve and stand out in this subject?
Yeah, these topics are clearly moving forward, too slowly for sure. But the studio that are taking risk are proving that a game can be a global success while advancing social and human question, because that is what it's all about. What is the ethical and societal responsibility of a medium that touches millions of people? This is for me the new stake, or just the stake of video game. And yeah, I think just studio should hire more people like Rob and me, committed designer, who realize that video games are not just about entertainment or fun, but there is some other more ethics and human topics behind that.
Yes. And I wanted to clear something. Rob, maybe you can help me, because I usually, I hear and I understand, and we're discussing right now inclusivity in game design. And then this goes into game development, right? And are there things that clash when it moves from design to development? Because, I don't know, it cannot be done, it takes too much resources. Is there, or those two teams can work in synergy whenever something is designed? It goes how do you say it? Seamlessly to the development.
It's never seamless. I wish it was, but it's never seamless. I think that there's a lot of different forces kind of tugging at each other. And I do think that it's all being pushed in the right direction. And I think that a lot of it's becoming the fact that games are now a pastime or a place to hang out. They're a destination, and they're not necessarily a thing to be won and competed over. But kind of getting back to your question, it used to be, hey, look, we're only going to make these kinds of games if you buy these kinds of games. Oh, we went and made this game that was very inclusive. Nobody bought it. See, it wasn't worth our time, right? And the problem is we're not just trying. You have to think not just, oh, I'm going to sell this one product. You have to say, we're going to start changing pop culture. We're going to start changing what games mean, because if we wanted to hire more people, let's say we wanted more trans people in the industry, which we do. Well, regardless of your background, people who want to get into games tend to like games. And you tend to like games if there's stuff there that are for you, right? So if you kind of go back 20 years, games were made for teenage boys. So teenage boys loved video games. So teenage boys grew up to want to make video games that they then made for other teenage boys. And that was the cycle. And to say, no, look, if we want to hire more people from this segment, we need to start making more games for them. And we're not going to see the payout right now. We're going to have that person love this game, grow up, go to school for it, and then get into it, which is a 10-year investment.
It's amazing, yeah.
And it's very hard to convince a room full of people to be like, yeah, well, you're making the game now and we want the profits next quarter. But it is slowly going in that direction. And I think it is going that way because games are just more socially acceptable, right? It is now no longer the thing that you do in your basement, right? Like if we take any tabletop game, tabletops are like Dungeons and Dragons is now like in pop culture, like gamers play it. It's becoming just, hey, it's fun to play games. I remember when Settlers of Catan came out, and it's like now everyone likes board games. And it was just one of those things where it's okay to have a game that's not about me killing you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the start. That's what I get excited about.
I'm very touched by what you're saying because I feel very represented. When I was, when I don't know, I was 10. I remember my parents got us our Sega Genesis. That was like the first thing we had in the house with a bunch of games. And I don't know if it happened in the States or in Paris, but in Argentina, there used to be these little shops around everywhere that they would rent games. Did that exist in it was great, like, and you will go there and you will like exchange, take a game, and they had a few platforms. In this world you have Sega, in this world you have that. And I remember when I came across Echo the Dolphin, a super passive game of a dolphin that runs out of, you know it? Yeah, you know it.
Yeah.
So
I could never jump over that first thing you had to jump. Like
it was, I was buying magazines to try to find tricks to actually be able to pass the cave with enough air. But it was so exciting to me that I was playing a game that I was not a man, I was not a fighter. It was like casual. It was like you were like passing this thingy. And I felt so represented. I love this game. My mom eventually bought it for me. I still have it, by the way, and it still works on a new Sega that I purchased. This thing still works. It's like 30 years old, and it's so true. And we grew up like that. So the designers of our generation were designers who were either teenage boys playing teenage boys, doing games for teenage boys, and I'm so happy to hear that the industry is actually moving into making more Echo the Dolphins, so we have more or other things that represent other people. It's exciting. Micka, I wanted to ask you a question because this webinar is going to be sent to a lot of people who signed up, but also I have a few contacts in a lot of games schools that I promised to send it so they can send it in their newsletter. And I wanted to ask from each of you, Micka, I will start with you, if you could give, if you can share specific practices that you've done in the past that have been successful in convincing your studio or whoever you're creating the work, the design for, that worked, like tools or practices that you did in the past that actually did work in promoting diversity and inclusivity within your studio or whoever you were working with back then.
Yeah, concerning accessibility tools, I use the gameaccessibilityguideline.com website. You have all the accessibility topics. And for inclusion, I use my common sense, but I can also I can also work with internal advisory group. I also use a special guide, but it exists in French called Représenter la diversité, and which was created by a French association called Game Impact. And yeah, for the tips on promoting diversity, it takes a lot of courage, determination, patience, and a good therapist. I'm tired, please help me.
Rob, do you have any?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Micka, you were saying?
Yeah, it's just about, I don't know, human consideration. For me, it's simple. And it's like UX approach. For me, UX is 90% of logic and common sense. So, yeah. But,
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a handful of things we have. One, there's a pretty robust amount of laws nowadays that
Yeah.
actually are they help us a lot because it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
we have to do this. So that actually was a huge one because people don't have a choice. But the thing that always, I think, internally made people understand how important it was when we would have people in the studio play it. Like, just, you forget the the ins and outs of making games is hard. It's very stressful. It is therapy inducing. And at the end of the day, we're doing it to make people happy, right? To give people either an escape or a way to meet new people. Like, it's positive stuff. And it's very easy to lose sight of that in the crunch times and all the other fun stuff you have. And so it started with when we were working on Skylanders. Skylanders is a game mostly targeted at kids. And with Skylanders, we would make a lot of things where we would have to convince people, no, don't worry, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And you would have people who are very analytical and be like, I don't see why we're doing this. But the moment they saw a kid just lose it with joy, they were like, oh, done. And we took that forward when it came to accessibility. Now, this is a tricky one, too, because as much as it sounds like it would be nice, you can't go to your studio and say, hey, who's colorblind, right? There are laws actually preventing us from asking, but that honestly is like, to get someone who plays games differently than you do and plays your game, and then you see that they're having fun or they're now able to enjoy something that they have not been able to before, like, that right there will convince anyone and truly convince them, not just make them do it because some number said so. You can't always do that, but I think that's like the silver bullet is you're gonna have to work hard, you're gonna have to get something in, and then you prove it to people. And then if you do it a couple times, people are like, okay, yeah, we get it, it's totally important, and then it becomes a culture thing. But um, yeah, I wish the other things worked better. It's always
And Rob, how do you see? Do you think that the diversity and inclusion in game design, development, or the whole package, do you think it will impact the future of the gaming industry in some way? Do you think it will open new roads, more audience? How do you see it evolving?
I think it definitely will. I think you're going to start to see a lot of what were considered niche genres become much bigger, right? There was a book written back in the 70s. It was called Games Without Winners, and it is essentially, oddly enough, half the book was about using a parachute. But have you ever been to like a summer camp where kids stand in circles and play games and things like that? Those are games that people are playing and no one's actually winning the game.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more, once again, pastimes like that. To talk about Fortnite, right? Fortnite used to be about like protecting the village and everything like that. But because Fortnite has such a broad audience of players, people don't even play the game when they play the game, right? They just log in and they do whatever, and they don't even care if they're winning or losing. They're just hanging out with their friends. They're watching a concert. Like, it's become a place to hang out. And I refer to a lot of people like, if you were to go bowling, right? I'm going to go to the bowling alley. I don't even like bowling. It doesn't matter. I'm hanging out with my friends. We're having bad chips, right? Like, we're having and we're
soggy chips,
right. And the wrapping is we're bowling, but we're not.
Yeah.
We're spending time with each other. And the same thing was true. I remember when I was really into playing World of Warcraft, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to hop onto World of Warcraft. And I didn't care what we did. I was in a group with my friends and we were talking online. And so that's where I would like to see more of the game going, more cozy games, more games about collecting furniture or mowing your lawn or curating your own little place of the world. And in fact, I even like to see more of it be around like more awareness of your impact, right? So carbon footprints, environmental consciousness, and everything like that. Right now, we're on a planet that's very, very big. And I think people still struggle with understanding, oh, I did this thing over here and it's messing with people over there. And then you add country borders and other things in there. Well, with a game, you have communities, you have little worlds. And I would love to see someone brave enough to be like, hey, you're in World of Warcraft and you cut down all the trees. There's just no trees on that server anymore. Like, do people stop playing? Like, I think that's the worry, is people would just abuse the system. But when you start saying the game is not about winning, the game is about playing, you start to open it up to not just different types of games, but once again, different types of people. Because I do think one of the big things that is a hurdle for a lot of people is the pacing of the game. If a game is very fast-paced and twitchy, it's a barrier for a lot of people, right? Whereas if the game is like, look, move at your own pace, right? If you have to push 5 buttons instead of 1 or other things like that, but you'll get there and you're not penalized for going slower, way better, right? And so, yeah, people need to slow down a little in their games.
In general, not only for the topic of this webinar. I just came back from GDC and everything, like that week passed like it was 24 hours, I'm telling you. No, but really, I absolutely agree. We all need to slow down. And I think that it's, the environmental impact of everything, but we're talking right now about the games industry, and it should have a more important place in the way studios, the industry in general, makes decisions. I agree. And okay, so I have one last question, and it's not absolutely related to this, but since most of our audience will be game designers, probably I wanted to hear, Micka, if you can give one piece of advice to an aspiring game designer or an aspiring game developer that is looking to work in the inclusivity and diversity area. What would you say?
First, accept that you have to design for others and not for yourself. But above all, realize that your job is to offer dream space and freedom for others, and that you therefore have a huge responsibility for what the world of tomorrow will look like. Because, yeah, that's the real power of video game, allowing you to escape reality. And this is why marginalized people need video games even more than others to escape the shackles of society. And we are all different brain. It's not even about disability or accessibility. Everybody works differently, have different time to play, level of tired. So yeah, this is just create escape for everybody.
Thank you. Rob, can you share a piece of advice for someone starting?
Become very comfortable with your own ignorance and always try to educate yourself to be better, right? Like never, I don't think there'll ever be a time where I'm like, yes, I'm advocating for this player type. I know everything they want, right? The only person I know everything they want of is me. And that's on a good day, right? Like, I don't know what I want for lunch now. So for me to assume, oh, yes, I know what this group of people want and what they find fun, that's, yes, my heart's in the right place. I'm advocating for them, but like, it's okay to ask. It's okay to understand that you don't know what they want and you need to go educate yourself on that matter. Because every single game design should start with the question, who am I making this for? And a lot of times designers don't start there. They start with, I have a really cool idea. And don't get me wrong, really cool ideas are great, but even if your inspiration starts there, it should be like, okay, well, cool, who are you making it for? And are they going to like it? Because unless you're just making the game for yourself, which that's cool, go ahead, do that. I hope you buy 1 million copies of your own game. But it's definitely be aware of your own shortcomings, because you, just like everyone you're advocating for, you only see a small little wedge, right? So yeah, just I think self-awareness.
Thank you so much, to both of you, for taking the time and talking to us, to me. I'm talking again. I'm a company myself. Talking to me. And this is a pre-recorded webinar, so we're going to get some questions most likely in on the comments whenever we post it, or sometimes we get them on email when we email it to the people who sign up. So if you have questions, you can leave them in the comments, and you can email them to us, to the email address that we send you the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer the ones that we can. And again, thank you so much. Now I'm going to have to think of another topic to meet you in a few months, because I like doing these webinars with you. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Rob and Micka, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you too.